Hello, everyone, and welcome down to episode number 76 of the Down South Photo Show with me, Brendan Waits, here in Ocean Grove, Victoria, Australia, and the guy on the other screen or in your other ear if you're listening to the podcast, it is Cam Blake in Hobart, Tasmania. Hello, Cameron.
Good afternoon, good evening, Brendan. How are you?
Very, very well. Very well, thank you.
You've got that intro down pat these days, haven't you?
I could just about do it underwater with a mouthful of peanuts.
Yeah, I'm glad you said peanuts then. I reckon we could get a T-shirt here, like "Hello, everyone."
That's right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It's. I think when we get to episode 100, I might do a montage of all the.
Yeah,
Who's got time for that? That's not going to happen.
We're getting pretty close. We're only 14 episodes off the ton.
That would be 24, Mr. Maths.
Oh, yes, it would be 24. Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And I'm not editing that out. That is staying in.
Well, it wasn't, isn't there? What's that factor of 7? What was that factor of 21? Whatever it was.
Look, never mind. You're a photographer. That's the main thing.
Yeah. But anyway, if we do the episodes on the overland track, do they all every day count as one episode?
No. It's episode. It'll be episode 77, part 1. Part 2, part 3, part 4, and part 5, and probably part 6.
Yeah. So which day we'll have the helicopter arriving?
That's right. Now, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with the pod or new to the pod, welcome aboard. It's lovely to have you here.
Yeah.
Cameron and I are about to embark on the overland track in Tasmania. I am jumping on the Big Bird and flying down on. I'll be there when this goes to air, going down Friday morning.
When this goes to air on Friday morning.
Well, this will go to air Friday night, but I'm going down Friday morning. So for those of you playing along at home,
try and keep
up. Going to go and have a look and see what it's like doing the overland track, and probably get a few photos and hang out with the guy on the other screen there, which I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, you got 6 days of me. You can't run away from me on 6 days. You can't.
Well, I've already had 76 episodes of you. So
but you're on another side of the screen. It's not the same.
Right. True. Yeah.
You think I'm annoying in 1 hour. Wait till you spend 24 hours a day with me.
24 hours a day. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So six full days. Now, I am honestly looking forward to it. It's going to be a hoot.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're all ready to go pretty much. I think just the smallest final preparations to go, and then we'll be, so I pick you up Friday morning, and then we head to Cradle. We stay the night at Cradle, and then on Saturday morning for guys listening at home. So when you've I think most people listen to this podcast on Saturdays.
On the weekend, yeah.
On the weekend. So when you're listening to this, just give a shout out to us, because we will most likely be walking through about 40 or 50K winds, sideways rain, as we go up the top of this bit right here in the back of my background, which is Marion's Lookout, and then we got to go. I can't even do that along there and out the back. Yeah. So yes, should be fun. I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully we can get some great little recordings along the way and bring back a bit of the overland track to our subscribers and fans.
We need to discuss logistics on that, but we can do that off air. We'll work all that out.
I can do it now. I've got a camera. I've got a double mic on its way. We're done.
Okay.
Are you bringing a tripod?
No.
That's right. We'll borrow. I'm not bringing one either, so we'll borrow someone's tripod.
So two professional photographers are not bringing tripods. That's great.
That's what the world's come into with image stabilization.
Well, that's right.
Like
That's right. This is going to work really well.
And I would be hell bent impressed if we see a star the whole time.
That's right. There's going to be no Astro.
So there's going to be no Astro. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And with my built-in ND filters on my OM5, I can take photos of waterfalls handheld.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. It is one little quick side thing on that. Like this will be the first time I haven't taken a tripod on the track, but I am confident enough that with the OM1 I've got and hand holding at least half a second, that's going to do me for most things.
Yeah.
Technology is certainly making it easier, and that saves me about 2 kilos, 1.5 kilos of weight.
Okay, so would you like me to bring this?
No. Worst case scenario, I've got one of those gorilla potty things.
Yeah, I've got one of those somewhere.
But we're going to have that many tripods on the site. We'll just steal someone else. We'll let them carry it, and then we'll use it.
Exactly. Yeah. Can we borrow? Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. So
perfect. Thanks for everyone who has liked, subscribed, and followed the channel over the last 7 days. We appreciate you coming on board. Our subscriber count has ticked up to 471 subs. Thank you very much. Probably once we get over 500, we'll stop saying how many we're at, but we're closing in. We've got 29 to go to get to 500.
I thought it was 19.
No, it's 29. So.
And to the 472nd sub that disappeared sometime in the last couple of hours.
We're sorry.
Lost. Yeah, no, we're not sorry.
We offended you.
No. You can go. There's other podcasts that you can listen to. There's one that goes for like 4 hours an episode. Yeah. Feel free to go tune into that.
Go and jump on that one. Thank you for everyone who's visited dsps.com.au, which is downsouthphotoshow.com.au, and donated some beer for us. So we have a beer donation button there. So thanks to James D, Sarah E, and Mel H again.
You know, that sounded like
making a habit of this.
That sounded like the Brownlow. And one vote to and round 21.
That's right. So
Mel three votes goes to Mel H.
That's right. So
that's
thank
awesome.
You.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Very cool. So
I actually had a beer before we came on here, so thank you.
Lovely. Yep.
And I think I'll probably have a few more tomorrow night and Thursday night because I'm not going to be able to do it for the next 7 days. Right. So it's probably a good thing that we have a few before we go.
Yes, and then we'll have one together in Hobart.
Yes, we will
at the end of it all. Looking forward to it. It's going to be grouse. Main topic for discussion tonight, Cam. Shall I lead the way?
Yeah. Well, do you want me to lead the way? Because maybe you've struggled reading it before, so maybe I'll go.
Please.
So I just came back from a trip around Tassie with good friend Sang Ma from Venture Photography Tours in WA, or what did you call it last week? Western Cactus.
Western Cactus, yes.
Yeah, so it's from Western Cactus. And we had a bit of a discussion over dinner one night in Strawn about things like focus stacking, back button focusing, all the things that have triggered me over the last year and a half of running this show. And I'm pretty sure I was getting triggered by them at dinner as well. But it got us talking about, how much should you stress about your files when you're shooting versus, if you're just going to put them online, like, do you really have to pixel peep every single pixel to make sure it's ultra sharp and all that kind of jazz? And I'm a bit of a believer that, if you're not printing out your photos and you're not doing anything major with them, then I reckon there's about a 2 to 5% variance of what you can get away with, I guess, with not being a perfect file or perfect sharpness and stuff like that. But we had this discussion and, a few of them said, no, you've got to be sharp all the way through and pixel peep everything. A couple of others said, you know what? No, I think, if you're not going to be printing them big, then it's not a big deal. But I thought it'd be a good discussion about sharpness in images and sort of stressing about what your files are going to look like if really the final outcome is you just putting it online on Instagram or Facebook or your website or whatever it might be. And you being a printer, clearly you would have a fairly good insight into what makes a good file versus not a great file. And I'm sure there's a bit of leeway in there as to what can be acceptably okay versus what's just not okay. But yeah, I thought we'd open that discussion. I think it's one that people have a lot. And it's around that pixel peeping and people going a bit too far.
Well, let's start where you got to, and that is in terms of printing photos, because that's my thing. That's what I've been doing for the last forever years. And what you said there was pretty much spot on. If you're not going to be printing your photos large, or if you're just going to be sharing them on socials and that sort of stuff, it'd be pretty easy just to sit back and say, well, they probably don't need to be as sharp front to back. Now, this thing about having an image sharp front to back and using techniques like focus stacking to achieve that does not suit every image. No. Now, case in point, Cam, is the image behind you right now, which we haven't. We'll come back to locations and stuff later. But that image there, for example, I would argue that there is no need for that to be pin sharp front to back when clearly there is a foreground subject there that is sharp as a tack by the looks of it, going by we're all looking on a computer screen now, or a TV screen if you're YouTubing and that sort of stuff. That sort of image there, I don't understand why you would go to all the trouble of focus stacking that when you could just shoot at an aperture of f8, f11, I don't know what that is, but it's probably around there somewhere, and get it to a level of sharpness which is more than acceptable, even if you're printing huge.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, if you were to do that as a, let's say 1.5 by 1 meter canvas that I could do for you, it would look absolutely fabulous. And I would argue that making it sharp front to back would actually take away from what you were trying to achieve with that image, and that is have a focal point in the foreground. They're called focal points for a reason.
Yeah.
And if that image was sharp front to back, that's not how the human eye works. That's not how you see things in real life, if you like. So I mean, it's a bit of a can of worms, this, but I can see occasionally when there would be a need for it.
Yeah.
But that image that you've got behind you, definitely not.
Yeah, and that's the sort of discussion. And we had a gentleman on the trip, Jason, his name was, and he actually runs a print lab out of WA, and does wonderful photography and knows his way around a printer and what to look for. And I think he was almost sitting on the fence a bit with the discussion around about a bit like you, like, there is sometimes when a file needs to be pin sharp if you're doing really big prints on, fine metal printing or really fine gloss paper or something like that. But then on the other hand, if you're putting it on a canvas, then a lot of that sharpness gets lost in the canvas anyway. So I think it was a good discussion we had around that. But I think, yeah, you're right. Like, not every image has to be sharp from the very first pixel to the very last pixel, I don't think. The shot behind me that we're talking about, which is Cradle Mountain, yeah, those rocks in the foreground are sharp. The big rock out to the right here is also very sharp, and it does lose a small amount of sharpness on the peaks of Cradle Mountain. But to me, that's an acceptable amount of loss for printing, especially, but even more so if you're just going to be squeezing those pixels down and putting them online. So what happened with this conversation, it sort of evolved a bit around the sharpness of images and using focus stacking and all these other techniques. And it got down to, maybe it's more about what the artist's expectations of their own work is, and whether or not, if you're a perfectionist where you have to get every single pixel as sharp as each other, or whether or not you're okay to accept a little bit of loss of sharpness or a failure of sharpness in your shot. And I'm of the latter. I think that if you spend all this time focus stacking and all this time sharpening and all this time using topaz sharpening or whatever it might be, I think you're sort of losing the whole spirit of what the whole photography is about, as opposed to someone who is just killing themselves inside if their file's not perfect. And yeah, it's a funny one. And I think it's detrimental to a photographer if you're going to spend that much time and emphasis on looking at those pixels.
As you were speaking there, I had a realization. I had a moment, Cam.
Oh my God.
You might want to call it an epiphany. I had an epiphany.
Right, yeah.
And I think, so if we go back through our podcasts and things that we discuss that are normally controversial or normally, get the most comments and feedback, because people like, I don't know, I say people like controversy. People like it when things have, when there's a varying amount of opinions.
Yeah.
When things are polarizing, where some people have a different opinion to us.
Yeah.
And the two big ones that we've maybe a third, but the two big ones that we've talked about that have caused a lot of triggering: focus stacking, back button autofocus, and to a lesser extent AI. Those were the 3 episodes that I can remember from recent memory that have caused a fair bit of carry on.
Yeah.
Those 3 things all have their place in a particular type of photography.
Yeah.
It ain't landscape. All right. Now, this is a landscape photography show. You're a landscape photographer, so am I.
Yeah.
Generally, as a rule of thumb, we like all kinds of photography, but
Yeah.
Our main thrust is landscape photography.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about focus stacking, I don't think focus stacking stacks up with landscape as much as it does with, for example, product photography, macro photography, even to some extent portrait photography as well.
Yeah.
I love macro photography when it's focus stacked, because you generally can, when you've got a macro. So let's use the example of a dragonfly.
Yeah.
If you've got an image of a dragonfly that is sharply focused from its eyes to the back of its tail, that looks awesome, because that amount of depth of field is generally what you can see with the naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that image behind you, I'm looking at those rocks. If I'm standing there looking at that scene, I'm looking at those rocks, or I'm looking up to Cradle Mountain, or I'm looking across to the rock on the other side. It's not focus stacking doesn't work with landscape, in my opinion, because it's not the natural feel of the image to start with. Whereas with macro, it certainly does. Now, if you flip that to back button autofocus, all the feedback we got about back button autofocus was from wildlife photographers.
Yeah,
They kept
that's right.
saying, no, it's so important so that I can keep my subject in focus while using the trigger. Perfect. Doesn't work for landscape. It's unnecessary for landscape because it ain't moving anywhere generally, and you don't have to be hot on the trigger for it. So, you know, I can see everyone's point of view, but I think they need to look through the lens of a landscape photographer. Yeah, pardon the pun. Landscape photographers like we are.
Yeah, I think you raised some excellent points there. And that's
unlike
the thought.
Me.
Yeah, I know it's very rare. So we should stop the podcast and that's it. We're finished. Yeah, but no, I think you're right. And what I try and explain to people, and I think again with the topics I raise and we raise on this show, and people get their knickers in a knot a little bit about things, I think why people might get a little bit testy about what we talk about is because we're actually hitting the point. We're hitting the mark. We're hitting the mark. We're hitting the mark with what they, and I think, I'll use some people on this trip as an example. I could tell when I was saying to people on that table, I was talking at dinner about this whole thing. I could tell that some of them were like, I know you're 100% right. We don't need to pixel peep everything. We don't need to focus stack everything, but I can't help myself because I have to do it. I feel like I have to do it. I feel like I feel like my file has to be absolutely spot on all the time.
Yeah.
And I think why people sort of get a little bit of their back up about focus stacking, back button focusing and stuff like that, I think it's because they have gone down a bit of a rabbit hole of trying to improve their photography by looking at other YouTubers or other professionals in the market and trying to pick up things they do to try and help them improve their photography.
Yeah.
And I think that is good in a way, like definitely tick up tips and stuff like that. But if you're going, hey, that's what Cam does, I'm going to do it, and that's it, because that's who does it and no one else does it. I think you're doing it all for the wrong reason. And a lot of the conversation we had around this table about the focus stacking, they were asking me, what about if you shoot, f16 or this? I'm like, yeah, if you get your hyperfocal distance right, it should be fairly close to on the mark. Yeah, but what if you've got a topic right in front of you and then something all the way down the back? I'm like, well, that's not realistic to have, like exactly what you said. It's not realistic to have everything sharp from there to back
in focus at once.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the response was, oh yeah, but that's how I want my image to look. I want it to look like it's sharp from front to back. And then trying to get the explanation as to why they want that sharp from very front to very back, I couldn't get one.
Yeah.
And the reason I couldn't get one is because they don't know.
That's right.
And they think that if it's sharp front to back, that means I'm a perfectionist. I've perfected the file. I've made the best photo ever. Yeah. That's not. All you're doing is creating something that's not necessarily realistic in a landscape photography view.
Yeah. And instead of asking the question of how do I do this, the question should be, should I do this?
Yes.
So for example, like if someone takes a landscape photo and they've been out in the field and they've got their tripod mounted and they've focus stacked it, they've shot their 7 images and focus stacked it, and then they've gone onto YouTube and got, right, how do I put all this together? I think the first question should be, does that actually work with the image that I've just taken?
Yes.
And ask that question first. Does it look perfectly fine how it is with one shot that, as you say, was set to correct hyperfocal distance and everything was nailed through the image using aperture rather than having to focus stack it?
Yeah. And what we came down to at the end of this conversation, and there's no right or wrong. This is just my opinion, and people seem to like my opinion or don't like my opinion, so be it. But I think what it came down to, like, especially when I was talking to Singh about his work, he was very much, he wanted everything sharp, front to back, pixels sharp, use focus stacking if he needed, use all the tools that were available. And he put it down to his in a photography mind that he wants everything to be perfect. And I go back to the point that, well, to me, photography is not a perfect art. And to me, that there is no such thing as a perfect photo. There's always flaws in a photo of some sort. But to me, what photography is about, especially landscape photography about, is capturing that moment and the light and all that done at once, not making it work later on. So as I said to a lot of guests on this trip, I'm a one frame person. So all the shots you see of mine, one frame. I'm not composing. I'm not focus stacking. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just trying to capture that moment in one shot. And to me, if I get a shot that looks great out of that one moment without having to fluff around with all the other tools, that's perfection to me.
Yeah.
So we have different understandings or different viewpoints of what perfection is. And I think what sort of annoys me a little bit about it is that all these people that use the analogy that they're going to be perfect about their shots, they never print them. So like the photography is about three things. It's about the shooting, it's about the developing or editing, and it's about the printing. And if you're not going to print it, then why are you wasting hours of editing time so you can just squeeze it down for this social media? I don't get it. It just,
yeah,
I can't get the answer for it.
No, I hear you. I think though, in some regards, it's good to have these skills in your arsenal. So if you do happen to get that shot that, that once in a lifetime shot that might require those techniques, it's good to keep those in your bag.
Yeah.
What I will say though is I think focus stacking is today's HDR. Now, do you remember HDR when that came out? It was about 10, 15 years ago. Digital was hot. Photoshop was huge.
Yeah.
And what you would do is you would bracket your exposures, and then you would layer your image, and then you would literally cut back the areas of the photo that were overexposed, and you'd make it a high dynamic range image or a HDR image.
Yeah.
So much so that Photoshop's next release had a HDR button, basically, that you would just do it for merge to HDR or whatever it was called. Yeah. And then there was companies that came out with HDR software, and the photos took on a it looked like someone puked the colors on the screen. They were just awful. Like it went way too far. And the very first incarnation of that was the saturation slider. Well, then it went to finding detail in shadows that should be there, should be seen, but in reality, no, they shouldn't be seen because it completely ruins the image. So
I used to call it clown vomit because it looked like a clown. It looked like a clown had just thrown up over the screen. And and I think you're right. I think focus stacking is a great tool, and it's a great thing for like you said, macro, product photography, architecture potentially, whatever it might be.
Oh, definitely architecture, for sure.
But I think it's one of those things that people have gone, oh, I can get sharpness from front to back if I just focus stack 12,000 shots, and my photo's perfect.
It's become a thing, and again, it's the answer to a question that should never have been asked in some cases. Like, you don't always have to focus stack, and I understand it because, as I say, 10, 15 years ago, I'd take a photo and go, oh, that's going to look so cool in HDR. I can't wait to HDR the crap out of that.
I don't think I ever went down that school.
I did for a little while, where I would take images in the back of my mind, thinking about high dynamic range. And I think the best thing that happened to HDR was the next incarnation of Photoshop gave me a slider where I could actually turn that shit down.
Well, that's right. And that's the thing. Like, it's one of the, if you look back at digital photography, there's you said it before, spot on. There's all these things all these fads that have come through. Yeah. So there was HDR, there was focus stacking, there's back button focusing. Now there's AI. Now there's denoising. There's all these things that people, and they're great tools and they're great to have. And like you said, they should be tools in everyone's kit. Yeah. But if you're just purely focusing on the end result of your file, trying to make it look perfect through the access to all these other options, you're doing it for the complete wrong reason. And unless you're selling a truckload of prints, and I mean big prints, or you have your own gallery, or whatever, then yes, I understand that you want the file to be as perfect as can for printing. But if you're not printing anything and you're just putting things on social media, you don't need focus stacking, full stop, unless you're doing macro or like the ones we've mentioned. You don't need back button focusing for most of that. So you don't need that. You certainly shouldn't be doing HDR. You don't need to denoise anything unless it's a really crappy high, 6400,000 ISO shot. So there's all these things that people get their hands on, and they just go to town on them, and they just become the norm. And then everyone else looks at it and goes, oh, that's what everyone else is doing. And just this ugly going forward type of thing where everything happens. And same thing on this trip as well. Like, we had some people that that's shot in aperture priority, manual, shutter priority, whatever it might be. And I try and teach aperture priority just so people understand the importance of aperture, which is your depth of field and all that kind of jazz. And some of the people shooting on manual are like, oh no, I like to be on manual because it gives me control. Like, okay. And then we get to a scene. It's like, what are you shooting on here? Oh, I'm on about F5, I think. Like there was no confidence in what they were saying about their aperture because they've watched a YouTube clip or someone's told them that they need to shoot in manual to get full control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
no, you're right. And that little gap, I love to bridge that gap with people and get, particularly when we're on a workshop, and get them to understand, no, don't shoot this scene at F4 just because you've seen it done before. Understand when you need F4, understand when you need F8, understand when you need other apertures and what they actually deliver to the scene. And I just want to rewind a little bit there. When you were saying people get so hung up on focus stacking, back button focus, HDR, but whatever it may be in the image, they completely forget about the composition. And I think composition, and we've said this a billion times, composition is numero uno. It is the thing that will make your photo work, is to get your composition right from the very, very start. That's the first thing you look at. Then you start opening your toolbox and going into that weaponry that you've developed over your years of experience of being a landscape photographer. And that's when you delve into those and you start going, okay, this is what I'm going to need on this image to help this work, or it's not what I'm going to need. And what I like to do is pare it back to its purest form, if you like, where I'm looking at the image and go, right, less is more. It's time to stop. I've got it. This is it. I don't need to look at it and go, oh, that's going to look good if I focus stack it, and that's going to go blah, and HDR and all that sort of stuff. It should be, I think, in its purest form, landscape photography is composition first and foremost, and then it's basically aperture, and then it's basically get the shot. So,
so on this trip,
if I was to really condense it.
Yeah, well, I do condense it. I condense the absolute shit out of this when I do it in workshops. And we had a funny couple of conversations. We had one dinner. There was a lot of people on this trip that like cats. And each their own. This is completely random off script, but a lot of people like cats, and there was a lot of conversations and photos of cats being. I'm not a cat person; I'm a dog person, so that's fine. I sort of tuned out a bit. But one of the things I do teach, and I teach heavily in my workshops, and I call it the cat, and it stands for three things: composition, aperture, and the right time of day. Three super duper things, like the shot behind you. Composition, good. Aperture, probably okay. Time of day, perfect. They are the three easiest things to get right in your camera before you even start digging into that bag of goodies of focus stacking and all the other stuff. Get your composition right, like you said. Choose the right aperture to get the depth of field you want. And am I there at the right time of day, or am I trying to take a shot that's just not going to work? And if you get those three things lined up, I can guarantee you 95% of the time, your shot will be good. And no one's going to look at it and go, oh, it's a bit soft in the back there. They're not going to care.
And I think being able to understand the relationship between composition, aperture, and time of day, that's where it's important. So it's the areas in between those three things, the relationship between those three things, that only comes with experience and only comes with being out in the field and shooting and putting yourself into the right times of day, if you like. And that's to me, that's the hunt, that's the chase, is, getting those three things. When those three things line up, it's like the planets literally align, and it's like, right, this shot is on.
It does. Like it jumps off the screen at you as soon as you get that all right. And I'll admit, on the back of the screen after I take a shot, I'll zoom in to see if I've got the sharpness right or the hyperfocal right, and if I can see it's all sharp and I like the composition and the time of day is going off, I don't take many shots. I just sit there and enjoy it. Where you see all these other people setting up to do, 200 focus stacks from in front to the back, and, doing all these things with all these big, massive filters and all these things. They're not actually paying any attention to really what's going on behind it or in front of them. They're trying to make this camera create miracles that they can do by themselves if they just slow down, like I said, fill in the gaps of what everything they need to do. And stop worrying about what everyone else is telling them to do on YouTube or stupid podcasts that we might run or things like that. I think that's where people can improve quicker, is by probably listening maybe less of what the jargon is going around and really focusing on those core things that make a good photo, which, like I said, we just touched on that. But yeah, anyway, it's one of those topics that comes up every time, and there's definitely a for and against. Like, I was on my own on the table. Like, I had all these other people going, and I'm like, well, that's fine. That's fine. And, you know,
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
no, it's good.
I think
it's healthy.
Yeah, it is. I think once I learned to sort of let go of that stuff, of that noise, you know, of
yes,
you know, trying to polish a turd, you know, start with a polished diamond already.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Well, here you go. Here's an analogy for you that, like you said, you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter, as they say, right?
That's right.
So to me, the turd is the base shot that people try and take, and the glitter is the focus stacking and the denoising and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. If you like you said, if you use it in its right application at the right time, then absolutely it's great. But if you're relying on all that all the time, then...
And I think in the past I've been guilty of being a self-proclaimed lazy photographer. Like, and I say this a lot to people, I'll go to a location, I'll give up real quick if it becomes like second nature, where it ain't going to work here today, right?
Yeah.
And that always comes back to your third part of the cat, which is time of day.
Yeah.
I'm here at the wrong time, right? Yeah. I know there's a shot here, but it ain't today.
Yeah.
I generally give up pretty quick. And I used to say I'm a lazy photographer. No. I give up because I know it ain't going to happen. So I'm going to go and find somewhere or something that is going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important for people not to just put the camera away and go home. No. Find the composition that works where you are for the time of day that you are there.
Yeah,
we had a topic, by the way.
That's a great. I think it's great. Like, I think this is some really heavy tips for people listening, because I think there is a hell of a lot of photographers out there that might be in the beginner stage or intermediate stage where they're like, I just can't get my head around how to do all this. Like, why do these professionals or the guys doing well get it right all the time? Why am I not doing this? Why am I not doing that? I think there's a lot of noise, and pun intended, there's a lot of noise in the landscape industry business about how to do stuff. Do I do composites? Do I focus stack? Do all this kind of stuff? I think people need to go back to basics. And like I said, they need to understand the aperture. They understand composition. And the easiest way to fix get good photos, like I said, is time of day. Like, just get there early in the morning or late afternoon. So I think it's important that we talk about it. And again, if you're one of those landscape photographers out there who like to focus stack, who like to use all the tools that are available, then knock yourself out. I won't have any qualms with you with that. But don't come back to me saying that that's the only way you can take landscape photography, which is what I get a lot. That, you won't get your full sharpness, or you won't get the perfect file if you don't do this, this, and this. Because I think that is incorrect. I think I've got plenty of files in my hundreds of thousands of files I've got where I can probably put a handful easily to say these are perfect files to print, to sell, to publish, whatever they might be. Yeah.
So we've talked about creating sharpness where it may not necessarily be needed.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about creating sharpness where and when it is needed.
Yeah.
And the main, personally, I think it comes down to quality of lens is really important.
Yeah.
Don't expect to take that. Cam, can you cover your camera? Don't expect to take that photo behind, like that Cam's got there, with a kit lens, with a cheap kit. It ain't. I don't think it's going to cut the mustard. You may be able to get something close to it, but I'm going to hazard a guess that that's probably shot with one of the Olympus Pro lenses. I would guess one of the Zuiko lenses, is it, or with Hasselblad? No. What did you take that with?
That was with
Don't say iPhone or I'm hanging up.
That was an iPhone. No, it wasn't. It was the Leica. The Leica.
Yeah,
Leica.
Yep. Okay, so need I say more? So only amongst the sharpest lenses on the planet, along with the Olympus lenses and Canon L series lenses for that matter. They're marketed as sharp lenses because they bloody well are. They nail the hyperfocal. They get it right. So starting there, when you really want sharpness, lenses are essential.
Yeah, and it's funny again, like just watching people in workshops and day trips and stuff I do, and they always bring it back. Like, one of the first things, okay, what do you want to improve on your photography today or this week on the trip? Oh, I just can't seem to get sharpness in my photos. I reckon that'd be 7 or 8 times out of 10 the answer I get. Oh, composition is one really heavy one, and sharpness in my photos.
Yeah.
And then most of the time I look at the photographers, they're shooting in manual mode with no understanding of the aperture.
Yep.
They're shooting in autofocus, either trying to focus stack or trying to understand it, or they're putting their focal point, out the wrong way, not really understanding the hyperfocal distance as well. So, lenses quality is absolutely helps, but it's about knowing the basics. And I think what happens these days is too many people want to skip through the first few chapters and get to the point where I'm a professional photographer now. I'm shooting at a professional quality, and the first 3 chapters are how you do it, and the remaining 40 chapters is how you just polish on those skills. So the message I guess out of this is don't stress over your files if they're not perfect, because no file is perfect. You could give me any file in the world and I'll pick a fault with it, and I'm sure you would be able to as well. But instead of worrying about if your files are going to be absolutely perfect for printing, perfect for whatever, put the effort. Stress about whether or not your composition's right. Stress about whether or not you've used the right aperture, and stress about whether or not am I here at the right time of day, or am I just should I be at the pub? So we did that on this trip. We had one moment where we were in the forests, and Seng and I said to each other, like, this is a crystal blue day, middle of the sunshine. I said, we shouldn't be in a forest. And we said to the group, I said, you know what, this is not working light-wise. We're going to have a couple of hours off, and then we're going to come back into the park when the lights settle down a bit. And it was chalk and cheese, the quality of photos that would have been taken. So,
yeah. So, working in a camera shop like I own, I regularly get people coming in. They'll have SLR in hand, and they're walking up to the counter, and I know that they're about to ask me why their images aren't sharp. You can just see it. They're like, and there'll be an image on the screen, and they'll show it to me, and they'll say, why isn't this image sharp? The number one thing I do is check the EXIF data and see exactly how the photo was shot.
Yeah.
And 99 times out of 100, they have a shutter speed that is lower than 1/40th of a second.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the first question is, did you shoot this on a tripod? And it's like, no. Yeah,
tripod. I hate tripods. I hate getting my tripod.
That's right, exactly. And it's like, okay,
the same customers.
And that's not having a go at people. I mean, people just think, too many people think they can spend $2,000 on an SLR, and all of a sudden they're Ken Duncan. All of a sudden they're Cameron Blake.
Boy, I don't think so.
They're not.
They're not.
They're not.
Trust me, they don't want to be.
But it's that tiny little bit of technique that they pick up on, that they need to pick up on, that bridges that gap really quickly.
Yeah.
Shutter speed is crucial to sharpness, purely because if you're shooting handheld and you're under 1/60th of a second, this movement where you push the trigger is enough to rock the camera to make your image unsharp.
This one, when you're using
back button focus,
2 different bloody. I had a go at it. We had this whole discussion on this workshop as well about back button focusing, and I had a go at it. And we're taking photos of. I can't remember who we were. We're taking photos of something, and I'm like, explain to me, like, sell it to me. Oh, well, you just do this. You press the back, and this lady was doing it, and she's like trying to get her thumb in between her asses and her eye. And I'm like, you're trying to sell this to me, aren't you? Oh, yeah, it is a bit tricky to get my thumb in there. I said, when did this become an issue? I said, they actually put a thumb pad on the back of the camera for your thumb to rest there for stability. Because she was trying to do handheld shots in the rainforest is where we were. And she was doing that. And because her thumb was there and she's pressing the button, she had no stability in her hand.
Yeah.
And I changed it over, and within 2 seconds, her photos were fine.
Yeah. So I'll explain to people, if I've got time and I've got a shop full of customers, I'll actually show people how to mount their camera to a tripod.
Yeah.
Why you should have an alarm bell go off when your shutter speed is lower than 1/60th of a second, and also introduce them to this wonderful thing called the 2-second self timer.
Oh my God!
And every single time they're like, "Wow." I had no idea that A, I had to do that, and B, that I could do that. So, for those playing along at home that maybe amateurs and don't know what I'm talking about, 2-second self timer. Basically, you're setting the camera to take the photo 2 seconds after you push the shutter button. So it's a little timer. Yep. That 2 seconds is enough time for the camera to settle down, even if it's on a tripod and you push your shutter button. That movement will send a slight vibration through your camera, and your image won't be sharp when you pixel peep, when you bring it up bigger to have a closer look at it.
Yeah.
2 seconds will let your camera settle down. The camera will take the photo. Even things like mirror lockup, where, you know, that can be important if you're looking for razor sharp images.
I've got a question with that notice for you. This is actually a Dear Cam question that got sent in a few weeks ago.
Okay.
It's not this week's one.
Okay.
On a tripod, image stabilizer on or off?
Off.
Off.
Definitely off.
So image stabilizers. I've never turned my off ever.
Yeah, so image stabilizers work best handheld. If you've got your image stabilizer turned on while you're on a tripod, again, the motor that is activated for image stabilization is vibrating your lens ever so slightly. So particularly if you're using like 100 mil or 150 mil zoom, for example, you're magnifying camera shake by using your image stabilizer. So definitely off when tripod mounted.
See, we're going to disagree. because I've done some research on this, and this is why it's a question without notice. But I've done some research on this, and there's been changes in the image stabilizer technology in the last few years where the camera actually recognizes that it's on a tripod, and sometimes will disengage the image stabilization itself.
Well, that's a wonderful piece of technology.
There you go. Anyway, that was a question. It's one that I get all the time. I leave mine on, and other people say it's going to, and this goes back to this, but your file's not going to be sharp. So that's one of those things.
There's many. Okay, so to get to the crux of the issue, there are many things that help you deliver a sharp image when you want sharpness in a certain part of your image. And I think we've covered most of them. The last one that we haven't really talked about is ISO, because a noisy image can also appear to be out of focus when really it's just noisy because you've shot at 1600 ISO. Yeah.
Then you just chuck it through Topaz denoise.
That's right. Yeah.
Fix it up. That's proper.
There is a massive, you can really see the difference between in sharpness of a 100 ISO versus a 1600 ISO image. It's very, very apparent.
That was one of the funny things that came across on this workshop as well. We had a couple of people ask about that. They didn't actually realize that on a tripod you would use the lowest ISO you can to get that cleaner image, but they didn't actually realize that the ISO was also interfering with the sharpness of their images, so to speak.
That's right.
They just thought it was like a sensor thing.
And there we are. That's exactly what we talked about before. The relationship between all those things is crucial to understand that one affects the other, and you've got to constantly work within the spaces in between the important bits, the relationship area between aperture, shutter speed, ISO, all that sort of stuff.
Very good.
Good talk tonight. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, like I said, it was a big conversation. It might have been a couple of beers in as well, as they always are, but it's great to hear, and I'd love to hear what people think as well. Are people listening? Are they that purist that they just have to use every tool they can to get the sharpest image they can, or are they a bit like me where they're more concentrated on getting that composition and sharpness as best they can through the lens and minimal editing? So I'd like to hear people's point of view if they had one. Either way,
I don't reckon any photos ever won a landscape composition based on sharpness.
No,
it's all about composition, all of it.
It is. Yeah.
We have a little. We're hearkening back to about episode 12 of the Down South Photo Show here, when we used to have a segment called Photography Horror Stories.
Yeah.
Now this came about because I believe you had a gentleman that has gone back and started listening to early episodes of the.
Yeah. So our Dear Cam question is actually the same person that provided the horror story. Ian, who's from Melbourne, sent me an email saying he really loves the show and great listen. And he told a work colleague or a colleague of his about the show, and they went and binge listened. So like 70 episodes over the weekend, which I feel sorry for that person having to listen to our crap for how many hours is that? That's a lot of hours, isn't it? That's 70 hours.
Yeah, well, we average close to an hour per episode. Yeah.
So anyway, but Ian also attached this little horror story down the end. I did actually email him back today and asked if it was actually him who was the character of this horror story, but it's not. It was I think he said it was a friend of his father's who used to work. So, do you want to take it away, Mr. Horror Story?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, go for it.
This is from Ian in Melbourne. A horror story that you may enjoy is about a new photographer who joined a prominent newspaper in Melbourne. Now, I'm going to assume this is going back a while. I think
it's going back a while.
Back in the day.
It's not the Herald Sun. I'd say it's probably the Age, maybe.
It could be. Maybe it's the Truth.
The Truth. Jesus.
Remember that one?
No, I'm not familiar.
on his first day, he was issued with his photography gear, camera, lens, and a bag. He was told to try out his new gear and become familiar with it. So he ventured out to the nearby bridge to take in photos of the Yarra River and surrounds. But a clumsy knock of the bag perched on the bridge wall saw all the gear fall into the river.
It's a classic.
His next task was to tell his boss that he'd lost all his gear within the first hour since his issue to him. He did keep his job and was given another set of gear, and in time did get his photos published.
Yeah, that's a classic.
That is
can you imagine that? Just knocking the gear off first day of work. And back then, if it was a bit while ago, it was probably all film, and there's probably a bag full of film and lenses and everything's gone into the Yarra. Nothing comes out of the Yarra the same way it went in.
I wonder if it's still there.
Maybe. Could be. I've got a film camera that's down the bottom of the Franklin River somewhere. I lost years ago, 20-something years ago.
Yeah, I've got I've got a Lumix digital waterproof camera that is sitting under the surf off Kangaroo Island.
Imagine if you drained all the lakes and rivers around all the famous photography spots. How much gear would be there?
We have about an average of 2 GoPros a year wash up on the beach in Ocean Grove.
Oh, fantastic.
And invariably they get in contact with me, and then we share the images from the memory card normally. And we normally find sort of half the owners of them. So
yeah, right.
I was down at Kangaroo Island, and I had my Lumix FT1, I think it was, waterproof little camera, early digital waterproof camera. And borrowed a mate of mine's surfboard, and thought I'd try surfing. I've tried to surf twice. The first time I nearly knocked myself out. The second time this happened.
Right.
Put the camera in my back pocket of my board shorts, put the little Velcro thing down. Like, yep, no, that's fine. Yeah. And hoiked myself up onto the surfboard, hopped up onto the board.
Yeah.
And the camera just flew past me.
Right.
And just went plonk.
It's probably still there if it's waterproof.
Look, I have no doubt. I had some nice photos of that damn thing too, of the kids. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
You have a horror story for us about, normally it ends in disaster of losing gear or damaging.
Well, that was a good story in the end, a good news story in the end, because he kept his job and got published a few times. And
yes. Yeah. Do we have time for Dear Cam?
Yeah, I reckon we can answer that one pretty quick. I reckon.
Dear Cam and Brendan. Always gets read out if you get a yep. How do you record locations for future photographs and desired times and day and seasons to return to? Also from Ian, who supplied the horror story before.
Yeah, excellent, Ian. I like this question, but it's a quick one. The quickest thing I use is Google Maps. So if I drive around, I'm like, oh, that's cool, but I don't have time to stop. I just go on my Google Map, I pin it, and I actually star it. I have a star section in my Google Maps. Which keeps all the nice places I want to go to. Desired times and seasons to return to. I think that just goes in the memory bank that, okay, I was driving along there. That tree could be really cool for autumn, or, that mountain might look good with snow on it in the middle of winter or whatever. So, but I predominantly use Google Maps and star it. And sometimes I drive along and I'm like, oh, there's a star on my map. I don't remember that. And I forget why it's there. And then I go actually to have a look at the star and I'm like, oh, there's that beautiful old tree with a fence or whatever it might be. So mine's Google Maps, and maybe a little bit of photo pills to try and work out sun angles and things like that. The app photo pills.
Yeah.
What about you, Brendan? Because it's addressed to you as well.
Mine is all up here.
Oh, God,
I very rarely do log it. 9 times out of 10, it's because the chances of me going back to that place at the right time are rare anyway. It has to be something really out of the ordinary, for me to go, I'm coming back to that spot. And coincidentally, a couple of the spots are on our Mallee Murray workshop that we've got coming up. And that have we
got a workshop coming up?
That wasn't a cheeky, subtle way to work that in. However, we haven't spoken about my background yet. So this is my background. Hang on, I'm going to put to speaker mode so people can see it full screen. That is Lake Boga, up just shy of Swan Hill, up in the Mallee. Happens to be where my wife's from, and happens to be where we just spent Easter as well. So a great spot there, and people who know the Mallee or have grown up in the Mallee like I did will know there is nothing like a Mallee sunset.
I've heard that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, whether it's it's a lot of open plains and farmland and can get a bit dusty, so it might be something to do with that. But the Mallee does generally produce some pretty clean and cool sunsets like that very one right there.
So we've still got spots on our Murray Mallee workshop. Sometime in October. Haven't got the details there.
October 14, I believe.
I think it is October 14. I'm just going into it now, but we have got a few spots. Although
it's actually October 12. Let's get this right.
October 12 to 16.
Thank you.
We have a few places left. I reckon we might pick up a couple of people from my workshop that just happened.
Yep.
Who are very keen to come along. So I reckon we'll have probably 3 spots left or so coming up soon. So don't muck around. Get on, have a look. Everything's covered: accommodation, transfers, food, education, and like we've just been talking about today, you're going to get the bee's knees of all the information that we have and how to get those shots right every time. We're not going to teach you how to focus stack unless you're really big. We'll try and encourage you not to.
Even then we won't.
And we certainly won't teach you back button focusing. But if you want to come out, have a few days away and take some excellent shots with us larrikins, then we might even have a couple of beers. I don't know.
Yep. And I think we need to mention once again the absolute highlight, the jewel in the crown of this trip will be Lake Tyrrell.
Yes.
And I'm sure those of you listening have heard of Lake Tyrrell or watching have heard of Lake Tyrrell up in the Mallee there. An absolutely gorgeous place to take some photos. So I'm looking forward to getting out there again and checking it all out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting up there. I think I've been past Lake Tyrrell. I haven't spent any real time up there before, but it'll be good. I will definitely be up there scouting before we go.
Yeah.
And
I think the thing that I'm most excited about is that it's an area that is, in my opinion, underrated for photography, and it's very different. Very, very different. It's not coastal, it's not mountainous, it's different. And the time of year that we're going will also be a great time for, I reckon we're going to get the odd wildflower as well, which is going to be pretty cool too.
Cool. One thing I will add to that as well. So people want to buy that, there'll be a link in the description, all that kind of stuff. It's bought through my website. So you can actually use Afterpay on my website. How good's that? So you can do that up to $2,000. But if you also...
Very cool.
It is very cool. But if you also are thinking you're coming along, but you're like, I can't probably put that money aside just yet, give us an email, because I'm happy for a lot of my guests to pay things off over a period of time. If it means you pay $500 a month or something, whatever it is, to get it up and pay the balance beforehand, you can do that as well. So it's not out of reach. We spoke about last week, some people thought it was a little bit out of reach, but it's not. It's not out of reach if you plan and you wish to join us. So
correct.
That'd be awesome. So look at us. We're almost at 55 minutes, Brendan. That's incredible for us.
Well, what's coming up for you this week, Cameron?
I have a big walk coming up.
Yes, you do.
Yes. What do you have?
I have the same. So this is it, guys. We're going to be
last receivers.
Possibly. Could be the last podcast ever for many reasons.
It could be. Yeah. We're gonna have a ball, and like I said, we'll try. Well, I think we can try and snip it 10 minutes each day after the walk, or at lunchtime on a walk, and we'll just quickly recap the day.
We're going to make that happen. I think that's a very, very good idea.
Even if it's on the iPhone, we can just record on the iPhone or something.
Exactly. I know a guy that can edit stuff together, so we'll
really. Can you get him to edit the YouTube stuff?
Sure. We'll do a better job than I am. It'll be great, mate. I'm really looking forward to it. And as I say, I will see you sometime
Friday.
Sometime before people have heard this. That's kind of weird to say that, but anyway, that's how.
So by the time people hear this, you and I will be at Cradle Mountain.
Yes.
Probably having a beer.
Pointing and laughing at all the crap that I've bought in my backpack.
Pointing and laughing at everyone's backpack.
That's right, exactly. What the hell did you bring that for?
The kitchen sink. Come on, that was a joke.
Right, yeah.
No, it should be good. And I'm really excited to bring... there's all the details of the workshop below in our notes, which I didn't see. But I'm looking forward to bringing the overland track to these guys. So that'll be definitely one that you want to probably visually watch. There'll still be a bit of fun laughing online as well. But it's been good fun.
All right. This has been episode 76. That's it. That's the podcast. We will see you for episode 77. I was going to say live from the overland track. Doesn't quite work like that, but it will be from the overland track next week. Bye for now.
Get your walking shoes on.
Oh, hey. Well, I nearly just ended the whole message instead of just doing this.